Okay, right. Peter, thanks very much for today's class. It was absolutely awesome, and I do apologise. I'm sweating loads, so if I blow my nose every now and again and just do a little reset, etc.
Sweating means that you worked with it.
Yeah, no, it was really good, and I really enjoyed those details. Just for, let's say, for those that might not know you, do you mind just introducing yourself?
I'm Peter Lavery. I'm the head coach of Kyoujin MMA, BJJ Revolution team. We're affiliated also with Team Ryano under Andy Ryan in Dublin.
Okay, fantastic.
Team has been going since 1994, so one of the longest jiu-jitsu clubs in the country, I think, rather than just in the north. So gives you an idea how old I am.
How did you get into martial arts? When did your journey start?
My journey in martial arts started with judo when I was like 9, mainly because I was really awful at football. All my friends played football. I was really awful at it. So I got into judo. I can't even remember. I think one of my friends was at a club in his school, in the secondary school here, and I would have left. I was in primary school, so I would have left primary. We finished earlier, so I would have left. You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't do it now, honestly. But I would have left primary school when I was at about sort of 3:30. Walked across to the secondary school, waited till they finished, and then they had a judo club. It was a guy called Kyoujin McKenna. He was the tech drawing teacher. So he taught judo, and I started then. Then I did what I think everyone does in their time. They sort of drift away from it for a while. And I happened to be talking to a friend a lot of years later, and there was a Thai boxing club that started in town, and I said I just wanted to do something again, so I went down, and I of course went down on the wrong night. There was a Japanese jiu-jitsu class going on. Don't. Oh Lord. So I got the wrong night anyway.
Right.
So I go down anyway, and there was a Japanese jiu-jitsu club going on. So the coach asked us to join in. So I did, and I stayed doing. It was under Bushi Kempo. A guy called David Hand was the head coach. I met two really, really good friends, Stephen Sweeney and Tom McRae. So we stayed doing Japanese jiu-jitsu. At the time, you were kind of dabbling with Brazilian jiu-jitsu because it hadn't really taken off as such. So you were reading stuff out of books and things. We really didn't have a clue. I got my first degree black belt under Bushi Kempo. They had a fallout with the coach. The coach just didn't want to teach anymore. So it was just one of those guys. So we stopped. I then hooked up with Ross and Akaro, who ran, in my opinion, still to this day, the best traditional jiu-jitsu style, taijutsu kind. So I started with Ross. Actually, Ross kind of vetted you a bit. You weren't allowed to join his
just
team.
Walk in.
Yeah. Especially sign up an affiliate to him. I can see his point. I think it was a really good thing that he did. He wanted to make sure you were dedicated to it first. So we did. It took sort of 3 or 4 years before he would actually let me join the team as such. So I started with Ross again at white belt. A good thing, I'll tell you where Ross was concerned. The amount of people who came out of taijutsu, right? At the time we had Mark Goddard was there.
Oh wow!
Doing traditional. Yeah. Who else was there? Paul Sutherland. A lot of the guys that are now very high up in MMA.
Yeah.
And are now Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts. They all started with Ross. That's how I met Mark and stuff like that back then. So at the time, I was sort of, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was still sort of, none of us had a clue really. so I hooked up with John Kavanagh. Actually got in touch with Ross. Ross was coming over to do a seminar, and John got in touch with him because Ross was also the contact for Carly Gracie. So he had brought Carly over. He was the first one. I think it was Paul Clifton who ran Combat Magazine, if you remember that. Was bringing Carly over. He asked Ross to host. So Ross got in touch with everybody and said, like, right, Carly's coming over. And it was the first real Brazilian jiu-jitsu guy that we had.
And did he walk on water when he came in?
I have a story. There are stories about the first Brazilians coming over. Some of them will make you cringe. They will really make you cringe. But I'll leave that to off the record because they're so bad.
You know what you said about vetting. Do you think like it's martial arts now? We're spoiled for choice. We're in a you guys paved the way, and there are all these clubs, and anyone can walk in, join the club without anyone vetting them and saying no. Do you think vetting back then was a test of loyalty? Because I'll give you a story. You know Brendan Ingle?
Yes.
Yeah, so famous Dublin boxing coach, moved to Sheffield. People would, after a little bit of success, and especially after Nazim Hamid became so popular, everybody flooded the gym. Brendan, I want to train boxing. I want to be a boxer. And he'd turn around and you want to be a boxer, do you? Yeah. Walk the lines. So they had to do a drill where they were 2 steps forward, jab, jab, side step, blah, blah. And he used to make them walk the lines for about 4 weeks. And what happened, after a few days, loads of them got bored and went, I don't want to do this, I want to hit the bags. And he goes, no, you got to walk the lines.
Yeah, I think.
And those that stayed, he knew he could train. And those that stayed went on to become his camp and his stable, so to speak. I
have an opinion, and I don't know whether you agree with it or not. And I see, whenever we had the MMA classes going on, I concentrate more on jiu-jitsu now than I do on MMA. But we've had so many people through the door. Some people have been really good and have got to pro level and they've what. But I tell them the same thing. I physically can't make you a fighter. Even in jiu-jitsu, I can't make you a fighter. Either you have it in you or you don't. Nothing I do or say after that is going to change what you are. And you see that, and it's normally the first time they spar, or the first time they get hit in the face, or the first time they get choked, or the first time they get tapped. Do you know what I mean? Either that'll be that done.
Yeah.
Or they'll accept it and they'll move on. Jiu-jitsu is different, wherein you're not, you can get choked or you can get tapped. I think it's more, in jiu-jitsu, it's more of an ego thing. Whereas if you get tapped, especially with someone smaller or someone lighter or a lower grade or whatever, and some people can't take that, so you sort of know. And as you said, if you use the Brendan Ingle thing, if you get guys who come in and and at the start, whenever there was very few Brazilian jiu-jitsu clubs going, and MMA was just starting out, really, never reached this. Nobody ever dreamed, I didn't think, especially in the UK and in Ireland, that it would reach the stage that it did. They would come in, and I've had 55 street fights. My thing is, have you done anything before? I did a bit of boxing. Everyone's done a bit of boxing, allegedly.
Yeah, boxed eggs.
Yeah, and then, they don't put the time in. And if you put a session on, not even a hard, your normal class, where like today was our normal class. We do a bit of some drills at the start, we do a bit of technique, we do a bit of, right? A lot of people can't do that. They expect to come in and be black belt level straight off the bat. And if they're getting some kid or one of the girls or whatever who tap them out, then
not for them.
It's not for them. Yeah. And I know that as a coach. We've been going for so long now that I have the luxury as such. First of all, this isn't my job. I don't do this for a living.
What do you do for a living?
I work in Queen's University. I work in the admin staff in Queen's. So I don't even do this for a living. Andy Ryan, you've known Andy's like a brother to me. We've known each other for a million years. Yeah. And he's kept saying to me, you've got it. The premise is you should do this full time. I keep going, no.
do you think if you committed to it full time, the love or the kind of shine would go off it?
That's exactly what.
Yeah,
I like to. sort of, I like to, obviously I like to, I do this is my hobby, this is like my second passion, not my first, right? I like to think I prefer playing bass than I do to play.
Oh, well, you're a musician as well?
I played,
fantastic.
So I'd always say I'd rather be a mediocre bass player than a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. Thankfully, I have the choice that I can be a mediocre.
Who are your inspirations on the bass?
Weird people. My inspiration firstly is a guy called Willie Dixon. If you're into blues, you'll understand who Willie Dixon is.
I liked Fleetwood Mac, the early stuff with Frank Green, and when it was Mick Fleetwood and John McVie and
bass
Frank
guitar
Green.
players I like from the old John Entwistle to start off with. On
John,
bass guitar. From the
Who.
Mark King. Now, Mark King played in the 80s in a band called Level 42. And there's that funk bass, like Bootsy Collins kind of bass guitar. So I'd rather be a bass player.
Well, we've got something else in common. I'm a musician as well.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I play the bagpipes.
Oh, hold on now. Now, do we have the Scottish bagpipes or the Irish pipes?
Yeah. You know, so technically they're called the Highland pipes, which is 3 drones, which came from Scotland. Irish pipes were called war pipes, and they were banned in Ireland, and they were 2 drones. So they were banned in Ireland a long time ago. So the history on the bagpipes is very, very sketchy. And I've been staying with my friend who's a historian. He used to work up at Hillsborough Castle, and he is a cracking musician as well, and plays on the circuit all around Northern Ireland. And we're like, anyone Scottish is going to hate me for this, but the kind of the history is told by.
Do you want coffee?
I'd love one. Yeah.
Coffees, yeah. Oh no, I don't want it. But do you want a burger?
No.
Coffees, yeah.
Just plain. Yeah. Cheers. I'm sweet enough.
No thanks.
I'm sweet enough. So history is kind of told by the victors, so to speak. There's like when I learned how to play, it was obviously in Edinburgh, and the history is kind of, it came from Phoenician times, and then there's a big gap, and we don't know what happened. And, do you know what I mean? So it's kind of filling the gap. So, but like with the music, I kind of burnt the candle at both ends, and it became a job, and then I really despised it, to be honest with you, and I haven't picked them up.
But you see, I was kind of the same when I was younger. You know, we got through I was playing all the time, and then it ended up, you were finishing work, and then you had a gig somewhere. I think, to be fair, it was a gig in Dublin that kind of just killed it for me. You know, this is a lot of years ago. They're tough to start up. But what had happened was I just got home from work, and the guy who sort of looked after the band, he goes, okay, we got to go with a gig. And I'm kind of, thinking it was local. And we came up, it was in Trinity College in Dublin. And I'm shattered, I'm just in. And this was during the week, it wasn't even like a weekend. And whenever I got home, I sort of went, and I never touched an instrument for years after it. You know, it was only maybe 10 years ago, maybe more, slightly, I started playing again.
Did you?
Yeah, but now it's a fun thing. Now I get together with friends.
You got the balance.
We do a bit, and we play. You know, but you know, it's strange now that I'm having more fun with it than what I did back in the day. You know, I can sort of sit, and it's like I can play or I can't.
Yeah, take it or leave it. I suppose the pressure's off.
Yeah.
Do you ever come across like competitors? You know, like you would have competitors in your gym that when they stop competing, their jiu-jitsu gets a little bit better, or they become a bit more.
Once the pressure's off.
Yeah, the pressure's off. Yeah.
We have.
Do you think you do need that pressure though, don't you? I find whenever I'm competing, I train more focused. I'm a real pain in the arse to be around with because all I'm thinking about is the competition. But once it's done, I feel like God, I've really overcome some hurdles there.
I think, first of all, where competing's concerned, I hate that, the waiting. So you know the competition's coming up. And I think a lot of fighters, a lot of athletes kind of put themselves under pressure, you know, and they're worried about how their teammates are going to think, what their coach is going to think, you know, whether they're good enough to be at that level, or you know, that's what's imposter syndrome. They sort of go out and they see, especially if you're watching. If you say you go to the Europeans, or you go which is over a lot of days, and you go to the venue all the time, and you're watching the blue belt section. You're a blue belt, and you're watching these guys, and you're like, you start to doubt yourself.
Yeah, the doubt starts to form.
And then the longer you're watching, the more the doubt kicks in, and you feel that you shouldn't be there, because I don't think I'm as good as that guy, but as soon as and you're right, as soon as you come back to I see guys in the gym, you've seen it yourself, guys in the gym who are brilliant. They'll never compete, they don't want to compete, right? But they're killing people in the gym. Yeah. But as soon as you mention competition,
I used to vomit before boxing, and then as soon as I took a punch in the face and I realised I wasn't made out of glass, a switch would go off. And in jiu-jitsu, in my last competition, I was stood at the edge of the mat, and I hadn't competed in a while because of the pandemic. And when last time I competed at Blue, I got proper steamrolled over, and I was just like, I think I broke my arm. My ego was very much dented. So it was the first time at Purple Belt. Stood at the edge of the mat, and I was like, I wish the alarm would go off in here and we'd all have to get evacuated, or I wish fucking anything would happen apart from the referee going, come forward. And then I was thinking, and this is how the internal narrative kind of works, I was going, what if I walk forward and my gi trousers fall down? And everybody starts laughing at me. And then, you just think like the worst. And it is like that fear avoidance. And I've done a lot of work and studied a lot of Jeff Thompson's work. Oh, yeah, because he's from Coventry, which is where I live. And
we trained with him and what was it? Peter Constantine.
Paddy Constantine is the actor. Peter Constantine is the karate guy that
he
trained
was
with.
his.
I'm going to ask you about that in a bit. So, and Jeff would say, fuck the fear, face the fear, turn into the fear. Don't be do your fear pyramid, etc. Expose yourself to that particular thing that you're scared of. And it was so strange that when the ref calls you forward and you walk onto the mat, everything slows down a little bit, and it's almost like when you can hear a pin drop. You bump hands, and then it goes combash, and then grip, and then it and it ramps up again. And
I did the last competition I did was the Lisbon Open. I never told anyone I was going. I just booked the flights, hotel, entered the competition, and went. And Redzer, you've met Redzer at Andy's?
Yeah. Well, I've not met him, but I saw Paul Redmond fight. I went to see him fight right before at the 3G Arena. He's never been there when I've been there. I'm dying to meet him. He's an old school MMA.
Yeah. He's great. His wrestling.
He's wicked. But
one of the. Yeah. There's a few guys at Andy's that I remember coming in to start off with. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Redzer's one of them. Known Redzer since he started with Andy. A few others, but Redzer still to this day goes, why? How did you do that? Going off with no team, no backup, no anything.
You don't need it in the street,
just because I would off to do it, And I'd be totally honest. Once I got there, I went, "What am I doing? What am I doing?" So. But when I went to the competition, and I hadn't fought in a while, and I go to the competition, and I'm sort of going, "This is grand. No, I'm not doing this for anybody. I'm doing it for myself."
Yeah.
So I'm off, and this is fine because truth was told, I'd had a couple of really bad years mentally. So this was I need to do this to try and get myself back on track. Right. So that's why I went. So when I get there, and I sort of look across to see who you're fighting. So I kind of look at the guy, never heard of him before, never met him before. Black belt from Brazil, as usual. And I sort of look. The guy's belt's like a zebra.
Oh no, yeah. Striped up.
Here we go. And I just, plus I always kind of enter a weight heavier, so I don't have to worry about weight.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So I got in and made weight and stuff that was fine. And I'd literally just sat down, and the girl goes, "Right, come on."
Oh, well.
So I went, nice. No, it's early, but I swear, just looking across and going, "Oh no, why?" I think he was a 5th or a 6th degree black belt for your first time in like 5 years. That fight didn't bother me. The second fight.
How did that go then?
I got beat. I got beat on. I think 3 points. I think he beat me by 3 points or something like that.
So the margin of error at your level is very, very slight. So what did you feel were the subtle differences?
His control was completely different. Once he took grips, it was completely different. You know what I mean? And I thought I could handle it. I could pass his grips and stuff, which was fine. But once we went onto the floor, it was one of these weird. The referee kind of stops you for some reason, and the two of us kind of look at each other and go, "What was that for?" You know, sort of. As if the fight wasn't off. Just like a penalty was being called or something. No sort of stop, and we sort of checked it. Did we come out? Did we go out of bounds or something?
Yeah.
So you're like, and as soon as they said start, again. So you're back in the same position. Start, and he just bam.
Wow.
And you were like, I should have seen it coming. You know, the second fight then in the semi-finals was against a French guy. Judo guy, straight off, you knew he was a judo guy. Had that same shape, and as soon as, again, judo guys, as soon as they take grips, you know that's who you're against.
You go in, yeah.
But that was fine. Again, he tried for takedowns, it didn't work, it was fine. And he got an advantage, and I cannot remember what it was for. Because in my opinion, everything he tried didn't work. So I was fine. And it wasn't until you look at the board, I think I scored on the pass, and he scored on something, and you look and there's an advantage point. That annoyed me more than anything else. But it got me out of that zone where I was, the mental blockage and stuff and all that. It got me out of the zone because I was angry going, he won by nothing.
Yeah.
That's not even, what that is he's tried to do something and it hasn't worked.
Yeah.
And that annoyed me more than anything else. So, yeah.
Did you feel like you were able to kind of like move that grey cloud, flush the toilet, move past that mental health issue that had stalled you? Did the competition help with that, or the journey for that?
The competition helped.
Yeah.
And then I came back and I felt better about it. I was hoping that by me going out to do it, it would kickstart the whole team into getting out to competitions and stuff. And it did. A few guys went out to do it. But then you realize that sometimes you just don't control of people. You just you can try to sort of. I keep trying to set examples. I wouldn't ask anyone to do anything I wouldn't do myself. So I go, right, I'll go and compete,
right, and
I'll see, what goes. Because I don't think a coach should ask anyone to fight or compete unless they've actually done it themselves. Because you can't. If you've never competed, just like we were talking now about how we felt in the bullpen and how we feel coming to competition, if you haven't competed, you can't describe that to somebody. So if you've got one of your students or one of the guys coming up, and they say, "Well, what's it like?" And you haven't done it yourself.
I agree with that.
Strange fighting, competing, and I suppose competing in any avenue is a strange thing, especially combat sports. I used to, whenever MMA started in Ireland, I was one of the first ones again that did that.
What's that like? What was that like being the first? You ever heard that expression, you can't beat being the first? Is that
when MMA started in the UK, I imagine, rather than Ireland, right, in its entirety, nobody had a clue. Right, we had no idea. And if you think about it, even where the UFC and stuff was concerned, at the pinnacle of the sport, they hadn't rules. They didn't know. There was no set guidelines.
It was just
there was no eye gouging, and that was pretty much
no biting.
I think, don't call their mum names, stuff like that. But over here was the same. And none of us. I remember Paddy Mooney. Paddy Mooney was the pioneer. Right, Paddy owned Cage Wars, still owns Cage Wars, and it was him and Doogie who owned. There were partnerships, right, and then the partnership split. Doogie started Cage Warriors, and Paddy kept Cage Wars, right, because the first cage in the UK was in Plymouth, if I'm right, and it was Cage Wars was in Plymouth. It was on a naval base or something, I think.
Possibly. I'm not like...
If I go right back into the thing, that was the first one.
I'm not mad on the history of it, to be honest.
In Ireland, it was at a community centre in Galway, the first cage. But the first...
Galway?
The first, like, MMA trials as such, right, was in Belfast. And they were done on mats. You had like 3 fights in a day, and we're talking 3 full contact. It would be worse than pro rules.
Wow.
Fights.
Wow.
You know, they're like with downward elbows, could wear wrestling boots, you could kick to the joints. It was insane. Paddy Mooney arrived with a bag of, I will loosely say gloves, but they were...
oven mitts.
They were horrendous.
They were oven mitts.
They weren't even that good. He sort of emptied out this bag of smell. And it was
oh God.
Something, it was horrendous. But that was the first ones. And Lee Hasdell, do you remember?
Yeah.
Lee was over.
Yeah.
You know, and he did it. He was refereeing some fights, him and Tom Lamont. Tom runs the Chum Sut Gym in Lisburn. And that was how it started here. You know, before the first cages and stuff came in, it was done in mats or done in the ring. Davy Patterson had EFR. That was done in the ring, you know. But that's when it started. And you had the like of Andy, John. You had people coming through. This is way before McGregor and way before. Way before that stuff. You know. And I think Paddy Mooney says I'm the first guy he knows to ever fight, ref, judge, coach on the same night.
That is brilliant. That is brilliant.
I think the only thing I didn't do was MC that night. But so when it comes to doing that, when it comes to fight, I tell people the funny stories. Yeah, you do this and this is the thing. But then I tell the guys who want to fight, and I say, right, this is the way it works. You're out back with your coach or your friends, and all the fighters are there, and it's good fun, and everyone's warming up while they're doing their thing. A friend of mine, Aidan Marin, he could pull a hoodie over and go to sleep. With all the noise, he would still go to sleep. So they would, and then the runner comes in and he says, right, it's time to go. So you walk out and you're in the corridor before you go out into the actual, and you're still hyped. And still, then you hear your music starts and the MC calls you. And MMA crowds are great. They just cheer everybody. They don't care. So as soon as the door opens, the lights go on, your music's blaring, everyone's cheering. Fantastic. You get to the cage. Maybe your opponent's already there. You know, maybe you have to wait on them coming in. Still mayhem going on. It's great. Your coach gives you the last thing. And then you hear a click, and that's the door shutting.
Yeah.
And no, it's not fun anymore. No, you're okay. Yeah. And then, as I said, you get punched in the face.
Yeah.
Now you got to do something.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Well, I mean, I work shows. I work MMA because I wrap hands, and I'm a certified cut man. Yeah. So I did it for the British Boxing Board of Control, and then I started working with MMA shows basically because it's kind of MMA is still quite not the top tier like UFC. I don't maybe Professional Fight League, is it?
The PFL is
PFL and maybe Cage Warriors. And what's the other one that's on Channel 5? Bellator. Yeah. So you've got obviously, you know, a UFC at the top, and the rest of those kind of sit underneath there, and they're really, really professional. But there are still quite a lot of, you know, up and coming MMA shows, and there's a lot of them at the moment. And
there was more. There was a lot of horrendous shows.
No, but sorry. So the ones that are coming through, I would say maybe aren't as organised as the top tier ones in regards to care, as in everyone has to have their hands wrapped. We have cutmen, trained cutmen on the corner. We've doctors doing pre and post fight medicals.
Yes.
We've got emergency services there. So it's still kind of like on the independent circuit. It's still very much a little bit like the Wild West. Probably not going to get any work for that comment, but anyway.
No, but
if you work, you make it more professional.
I've refereed in MMA. So I refereed from community centres when it first started, you know, to bars and hotels and stuff. I worked a lot of years for Cage Warriors as a referee, and I think I'm still the only Irish official in the UFC. I think I got that. I still did local shows, you know, and as I said, I saw a lot of the time over the years. Not so much. I think in the north now there's maybe 4 shows, maybe, and they do put the time in. They do have medical staff there, and that's because a lot of them have guys who fought on Cage Warriors, or they fought on the UFC, or they fought in now PFL. So they have guys who, KSW was the other one. So they've went through that.
And they're using their name to drive the promotion.
They can also see what way it's run.
Right.
You know, they can see what way. And at the start, I remember myself and a friend, a man he hasn't talked about enough. We get forgot about really quickly in
Who do you mean
MMA words. Well, I've stopped. I don't take anything to do with MMA now.
Right.
You know, Andy, again, I think he tries to get me to sort of go back in again, but I have no real interest. But a friend of mine, Dave Jones, we were the 2 real referees in the country, right? And it got to a stage where the shows were dangerous. They were just dangerous. You know, we would arrive at a show and we sat down, Davey Patterson, who I said before, who ran the EFR show, he asked myself and Dave to sort of work out rules, right? Sort of amateur rules and pro rules, right, at the time. And we sat down over a couple of weeks and we got this, right? This is the rules we're going to use, this and this. Again, I say to you, this is at the very start, you know. And then but this is before unified rules that everyone uses now, and proper referee training, which doesn't really go on, in my opinion. Mark Goddard has his thing for IMAF, which is really good. And if you ever sit in with Mark and listen to what he has to say, and you know, you pick up stuff that even I was refereeing for a long time before I actually did Mark's course, and there were still things that you said, "Go, why didn't I think of that?"
Mark was a good fighter back in the day as well.
Mark was he fought in Cage Rage a few times.
Yeah, I think people forget. Like, they just think he's like a ref, and I'm like, he's a black
you
belt.
You say that. That's funny because.
Do you get that?
I had to go to a club before. The coach asked me to come by, and whenever I went, they were sort of, "What's he doing here?" You know, I was there. That's Peter Lavery, the referee, and the coach goes, "What?" Not only is he a referee, but he's this. You know. So yeah, you still do get. There was a time where people said Dave was a brown belt under Chris Brennan. He was the highest level under Chris. Dave would have been Darragh O'Connell's coach back in the day.
Oh, okay, from East Coast. Dunleary, yeah.
But Darragh literally took over Dave's club whenever he retired. Dave had back injury, so he retired, and Darragh took over the club. So I remember on the old forums and stuff saying that some guys saying that Peter and Dave should really learn some jiu-jitsu because they don't know anything about the ground game. And the 2 of us were like, really? You know, we've been doing this for years. But you know, it's one of those things.
Do you think, because I said earlier, like, what's it like at the top? Can you become a bit of a target if you're the first one in? Does everyone come with a handshake, or is it a bit like, does it get quite competitive?
It does, and one of the, again, go back to something that Mark Goddard said to me years ago, was if you're good enough, people will come looking for you, right? You can't start to sort of sell yourself and that, but if you're good enough, people will have heard of you and they'll come looking for you, right? So I'd been refereeing here for a long time before Graham Boylan asked me to go to Cage Warriors, right? Now, what I did was I understood my place in Cage Warriors. At the time, Mark was like still the head referee.
Okay.
You know, you still had David Swan was still there. You know, you still had guys who had been there a while. And I knew that I was coming in at the bottom of the ladder, right? And it was, so I did. I went in and I just learned from the guys. Because again, you're going from community centres to this is, I would still say, one of the biggest promotions in Europe.
Yeah.
If that was. So you know your place. So you sit there and you learn off guys and you ask questions. You see how things are run, and hopefully then you start off from getting maybe 1 or 2 fights to then you go up the ladder a bit. Then you stop doing the undercard and you get some of the main event, the main card fights. I remember going to Wales one time with Cage Warriors, and the other referee never showed. I forget who it was who was meant to referee with me, and Graham saying to me, "You're on your own tonight. You have to do the entire main card." Wow. Which is pressure. But you have to do it. And then again, when it came to the UFC, I just remember getting a text, from Vegas going, "Do you want to come down and try?" And my first.
So how does that work? Are you contracted, or do they just pay you a sub?
There's two different with the UFC. Consider there's like 2 different official. America, everything's run by each state athletic commission.
Yeah. Right. Very much like boxing.
Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. The rules are set by Nevada State, the same as boxing.
Same as boxing. Yeah.
So, and that's because Mark Ratner came from the Boxing Board of Control into the MMA, the UFC part. So that's where that connection is. I think Mark went back to boxing recently, did he?
I don't know.
Mark Ratner set cage side every show. So the difference, so you have the American one, but they have no real it's not one umbrella sort of group. If you go to Nevada State, if you fight in Vegas, then Nevada State run it. Go to New York, the New York State Athletics. So it's all different, but you have to be licensed by each one. I think Mark is one of the few who is licensed
in each state.
And
Mark Goddard.
Mark Goddard.
Really?
I don't know if he's licensed in every state, but I know he is licensed in Vegas. He is licensed in New York. So.
Yeah. I think there are some states where it's still illegal.
But then it's the athletic commission. They appoint the referees. That's why you hear Dana going off on a rant about the officials and the stuff, because he has no say on who is appointed.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Now, the crowd that do Europe, I think it was, I don't know if he still does, Dave Lewis ran the whole, he did Europe and like Australia, Asia, that sort of thing. That was under the same remit. So that's why you get the same guys,
on
Ben,
that scene, the circuit.
Yeah, Ben, Mark, that sort of idea, who go out and do all the European gigs, and they do Australia, and they do, whenever Fight Island was there, do you remember, they went out and they did that, because it's the same guys that do it. Right. So that's where, because again, I got a text, "Do you want to come down?" And my first, before I got to do anything, I had to sit beside Mark Ratner and judge every fight, every single fight.
Without getting too technical, how do you judge an MMA fight? In fairness,
taking
away the knockout.
In fairness,
or an absolute pasting.
They literally tell
how do you score it?
They tell you how to do it at the start of every UFC fight night.
So there's a criteria.
Yeah, it starts. The first thing you're looking for is strikes.
Okay.
Is the striking ability. Now, it doesn't say it in the rules, but what you're looking for, they say effective striking, right? But what they mean by effective striking is damage.
Right. So how does
if
somebody like Khabib fit into that, who was
again, so what you look at is you start at the top, striking, effective striking, right? So someone could come out and throw 20 punches that don't really do anything, they're on the gloves or
no connection yet,
right?
Not a clean shot, yeah.
But the audience is watching how many times he's doing that, and then his opponent goes crack, and there's blood and there's things. So what's the most effective striking? The one that does the damage or the one that's on the arm?
Yeah.
So you have to score that.
So in that instance, you're scoring the most damaging shot.
I'm scoring the most effective striking, which is the one that causes damage.
Right.
Then if you can't separate the two, right, then you have to go to the next, which is effective grappling. Right? So you can't separate, so you look and see who's doing, if it goes on the floor.
Taking takedowns,
Let's look at it in a jiu-jitsu fight, right? If you are refereeing a jiu-jitsu fight or a grappling match, nogi, and there's a takedown, but there's nothing done with it. So the guy takes down, stands back up again, right? You can't score that because he hasn't really done anything with it. Mind you, if it's a takedown and he passes the guard and he throws some strikes in or something, then you can go, right, okay.
Right.
That's something to do. If you can't separate it then you go for, as it says, cage control, which is basically what you're looking for is aggression. You're looking for who wants it more. So once you sort of look at that and you sort of go, next time the UFC's on or you're at a show, and you watch and you sort of go, right, let's look. You're at a boxing match, right? It's going to be this great fight on tonight. I'm looking forward to it, actually.
You've been sarcastic there.
With the utmost sarcasm. So what you're looking for is, and you see it in boxing, a million punches, but they're all on the gloves or the arms. Yeah.
Well, I want to ask you about that. Did you watch the fight last week, Ben Whittaker versus Cameron too?
Yes. And
what did you think of Howard Foster's stoppage?
I thought it was early. Don't get me. You have like a flash knockout. Right, so when he hit Cameron, and it did rock him.
It buzzed him, yeah.
But then by the time I got over to the ropes again,
he got his hands up and he was
up and he was protecting himself.
Yeah.
But remember, Howard Foster did that before with the George
Groves and Carl Froch.
Yeah, it was exactly the same thing.
I know, yeah.
So
he's got a reputation as being a overprotective referee or a caring. George Groves even did a video and he said he's very much a caring referee.
Yeah.
So something to those effect. I don't want to take him out of context, or misquote him. But he was like empathetic referee, something like that.
To be fair, it's one of those things that. Here's again an example. If you are refereeing an amateur MMA fight, right? Now, there's a couple of different scenarios. This is a hotel show, a local show. So you've got amateur fighters, right? And then pro fighters. But it's a local show. Yeah. And then you're somewhere like Cage Warriors or UFC. Now, in the local show, amateur fighters, you'll sort of go, right, and you'll tell them at the rules meeting, if I see this arm hyperextended, yes, I will give you time, right? But if you're not getting out of it, I'm not going to let your arm break, right? I'll stop the fight. I'm letting you know that now before we go any further, right? If it's in that we know that you're not escaping it, right? Then I'm stopping it, right? You're an amateur fighter, you're not getting paid, right? Live to fight another day. The same show, a local show, is pro fighters. Now they're still not getting paid Cage Warriors and definitely not UFC money, even though UFC money isn't great, apparently, right? So you have to look at that fight and you'll let it go to an extent because they're pro fighters.
But not break.
Right.
Or potentially.
I credit them with sense that they will stop. They will tap and they will do it. Fighters are fighters.
Yeah.
But once you move up, Cage Warriors, PFL, there's a lot more money involved and there's a career involved.
Yeah.
Right? So you have to look at that. You have to let that fight go.
Run.
You have to let it go.
Yeah.
And especially, as I said, UFC, PFL, you have got to be bang on. You've got to be right.
Yeah, the margin for error is
if you're judging, it has to be bang on.
Yeah.
Now, the good thing about I think it's a positive thing where UFC and Cage Warriors, right, is after every show, you have like a debrief where they ask you. Mark Ratner would have done it. He would have asked, okay, so Peter, in this fight, this went on, you scored it, this way. What did you see that this judge didn't see? Even if all the judges were the same.
Sorry to interrupt you, Pete, but on the judges, are they all going to be black belts in jiu-jitsu? Are they all going to have striking?
No.
So if there's so many variables between you judging,
well, I can say
if you're a three-stripe black belt, you're going to see a lot more details in a grappling situation than somebody who's not, aren't you?
So this is the difference between what I can't say about the American guys, because again, where the judging is concerned, they're a point, and the referees, they used to have Yamasaki and stuff like that, you know, who you knew did their thing. But, you know, they're appointed. Now, the good thing is, I think Herb Dean is quite a high level. Mark definitely is.
Yeah, I think Herb is quite high level.
So you have those guys who are quite high level, so they know what they're doing. The other ones, the judges and stuff, they're appointed. I truthfully, I don't know any of them, so I can't say if they are or not. I do know the European crowd, who all train and who are all high level. You know, the referees, you know, black belt guys. You know, the judges are either black belt or thereabout. You know, so yes, they do have, and I know that because I know them. Yeah. You know, I know like Leon trains, you know, and it has done for years. So you do have those guys who have experience and know what they're looking for. The American ones, I don't know, because I don't know who they are. To be fair, I do think it takes you to have some experience in that, especially refereeing. I think that, and it's happened to me on a few occasions, whenever you go into a matchup, and maybe it's an amateur one, maybe it's the first time out, it's their debut, and you sort of look and you know the guy shouldn't really be there. You know, he's nervous, you can feel it, even talking to him, you know he's nervous. Now, again, this is after years of experience, you know, right, this guy, I need to watch him. You know, because he's either going to gas or he's going to get hurt. You know, so you will kind of watch this guy more than the other guy. If the other guy comes in, you know he's relaxed, you know he's trained, he's prepared, and then you see someone and you go, nah.
Mike Tyson used to bawl his eyes out before every fight.
I've seen that. You said I've seen people be sick.
Yeah.
I've seen people. Like 80 sleep.
Yeah.
You know, the different in the Euros and stuff, in the jiu-jitsu style, the jiu-jitsu competition, people who have come from, and even in MMA, people who have come from a traditional background are a lot more relaxed.
Traditional martial arts?
Yeah.
Really?
A lot more relaxed.
Really?
You look at like Andy for talk's sake.
Yeah.
Right? And Robbie, you've met Robbie down at Andy's?
I know Andy, I know Bill McCann.
Yeah, look at, like, Bill comes from a wrestling background.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
His son's Connor's really good.
Yeah, he's cracking like Connor, yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
but they come from a wrestling background, the sport, so they had competition like every week.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
Andy comes from a judo background. It's quite high level.
Well, he was on the Irish team, wasn't he? Yeah.
So he's fought at really going to the Olympic level.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
So again, he fought every other week. There was a judo competition. You know, you get guys like we have in here who do, like, there's Niall over there. Niall's I think it's the WBO Thai champion.
Oh,
right. World Thai champion. Right. And they compete every week. So those nerves, they might be there, but it's not Well, as a parent,
the more exposure exposure you have to them, they're less.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and again, this is a good kind of segue to what we were talking about earlier with Jeff Thompson, Fear Pyramid, and I feel like very lucky, having lived in Coventry for the last 17 years, been exposed to Jeff and all his proteges and all those people. Now I missed all of that because I came in a lot later.
Yeah.
And Jeff has gone full circle into I don't want to say Buddhism, but almost like the spiritual aspect of martial arts. Do you know what I mean? He's moved away from the physical aspect. But anyway, so having worked with his kind of like proteges, my first exposure was working with one of his top students, Matty Evans, and Matty would teach us defence, the self-defence technique, defence, and he would tell us about animal days. And whenever
I think Alan Charlton was there too back in the day.
I don't know.
He was one of
Tony Summers, but I remember these Jeff had this, he was from a traditional background which is karate. And he basically he worked on the doors, and he went, none of this shit works, none of this karate, kata, none of it works. And that's where he developed defense, the self-defense technique called defense, which was preemptive strike, boom, you get your first warning, and secondly, you're getting either punched or kicked or I'm running away.
Yeah.
And that's when him and Constantine set up the seminars, teaching people how to strike.
I was at a few of those.
And so was John, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And I remember, and I spoke to, because I podcasted with Jeff, and I met John after the night I watched Paul Redmond in Dublin. We were in the bar, John, Kiefer Crosby walked in, and I went, right, good win tonight, mate, well done. Then John Kavanagh walked in, and I went, John, nice to meet you, what a pleasure. And I said, I just finished reading your book, chapter 2. He's like, having attended seminars with Jeff Thompson in Coventry, it really taught me, and he was a massive mentor. And I said, so technically, in lineage, Jeff could have played a big part in John and
even if you look at John's, even if you look at the SBG thing under Matt Thornton, the aliveness thing, which is you have to train against a resistant opponent. You have to, this is the way it works, and they have that set. We were all, myself, Andy, we were all in the SBG. John gave me my blue belt back in 2005. So we were all there. And the aliveness thing does work, but it's the same as what Jeff Thompson was saying. You have to train against someone.
Stress test.
Yeah,
Stress
you
test.
have to pressure test them.
Yeah.
Otherwise, otherwise it's just a choreography, it's a dance.
Yes.
So one of the things I got from Jeff, and I think he says it in his book, and I was about working, I worked on the doors in Belfast. This is during the time when Belfast could be moody, shall we say. Belfast had its moments, shall we say. But, it was one of these, and it was a mental thing again. And it was about, and again an MMA thing, a jiu-jitsu thing. If you knock somebody out, right, can you handle that? Do you know what I mean? If it's a door situation or a street situation, and you crack someone and they fall and they hit their head off the floor, right? And now it's maybe the police are involved, maybe ambulances are involved.
Yeah, you're looking at manslaughter.
Maybe
attempted murder.
This guy maybe he has brothers, maybe he has friends. And in Belfast at the time, it wasn't just friends. These friends, some of them came heavily armed. And it's the same in an MMA thing. If you hit someone in the cage and they go down and they go out, and thankfully MMA doesn't have the fatality amount, shall we say, that like boxing does or anything else. Or in jiu-jitsu you choke somebody and they go out. If you can't handle that because that's a different thing altogether. Then you shouldn't. This isn't for you. MMA fighting's not for you.
Well, interesting you say that, because I'm not going to name who they are, but one of the kind of like hook lines from a big team in jiu-jitsu is jiu-jitsu for everyone.
Yeah, I've seen that.
So do you agree with that, or do you think it's not really for everyone? Or
again, people come to jiu-jitsu, combat sport, any sport, for their own reason. This is your personal thing, right? People will come for, maybe they want to compete. Maybe they want to get to a level that they want to do a competition. Maybe they want to go into MMA. Maybe they want that physicality stuff. Then you get people who come in, they enjoy the sparring,
the tribal aspect, social aspect.
They're never going to compete. That's not what they're here for. They're here to learn something new. Maybe they've just retired.
Maybe be a better version of themselves.
Yeah, maybe
in a
they just
few
want
years.
to expand their knowledge. Yeah. They've hit a stage where they've just retired from work, and they're sitting around the house. And it's a toss-up between Crown Green bowling or golf, or doing something like this.
Yeah.
So again, they want to learn something new.
Do you know what? We've got a guy who's in our gym, and he's a retired dentist. Sold all his dental practices off, and he came in and he started jiu-jitsu, and it wrecks my head because I'm just like, you should be on the golf course. What are you here? Like, I don't get it. And he loves it.
I've worked the door with dentists, but that's a different. I also we've got guys in our place. Some of them are like they're psychologists.
I met
Robin's
met Rob, yeah.
You have Paul, who's a pharmacist, right? Or we just refer to him as Feelgood, Dr. Feelgood. You've got guys who are, the jobs they do, why are you here?
Yeah.
Same thing. But they're here for their personal reason, and we can't criticize that. We can't say, well, we only train fighters, or we only train this. I've heard so many horror stories about boxing gyms, MMA gyms, where the guys who fight are the ones who get the most attention, and everybody else is kind of in the background. It's a reason why I don't do like separate classes. I don't do a beginner's class. I don't do a 12-week course. People do it and fine, and it works for them, and it's great, and they get numbers through the door, and it's great. But I don't think that anybody benefits from a crowd of white belts being white belts. You've seen them. White belts go in and they try to kill each other.
I'm just conscious of the fact that I'm about to start a course teaching next Thursday.
But listen, again, people do it and it's fair, and I know it's really, really good. I just think that, it's by the same token, I write out every class that I do.
Right. But there are people that come in and can't even do a forward roll. And
exactly.
Do you know what I mean? And it could be very, you could argue the fact that, well, what we were doing here, and if they went in with a blue or a purple belt, that's very athletic moves, fast, rapid, that would be like...
But again, this is the thing. This is why I believe in letting them kind of mix, right? It's because
experience that.
The blue belts that, like you were training with today, purple belts and stuff, who are all good, their standards really good, but they were white belts, right? So the ones I had before that looked after them when they were training, so we start to build that team idea, that team ethos from, we know how to look after you, it doesn't matter, because we were there once, God, I was there once, so we know how to sort of bring you along without smashing. It's one of the things I do when I'm watching the class. If I see someone that's out of their depth, I'll switch people around. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you're sort of going, well, you're going a bit too hard today, so let's switch him out and let's put this one in. But then, like, for talk's sake, with yourself coming in as a drop-in, and I hope you enjoyed the class. I
loved it. I thought it was great. And I've got 4 gems I'm going to take away.
Good.
Yeah,
good.
4 gems. Yeah.
My thing is, I turn around and I go, right, you've been training with Andrew. Andrew's quite good. He's a purple, comes from kickboxing background. But then I go, right, let's give you someone to work with. So Michael or Kerr that you were with earlier on, Kerr's good. He's about the same size as you. So now you'll get a bit of a roll go. Do you know what I mean? So you sort of look around and you go, okay, shall we say, during a class, when it comes to the roll session, and it's a thing, because people say to me, if I roll with a white belt, well, a purple belt rolls with a white belt. black belt goes with a white belt and beginner, you know, you're not going to get anything out of that. Yes, you are. If you look at it as three different sort of categories of a role, you should get one that is easy. You know, so again, purple belt against a white belt is going to be easy. One that's a 50-50. A purple belt against a purple belt is going to be 50-50. You don't know what way that's going to go. And then one that you're going to get smashed. You know, so say a good competitive black or brown belt against a purple. So the easy one, right, that you should by all means smash this guy. But that's where you start to perfect your technique. So if you have an idea in your head, I need this pass, I want to work this pass. So you do it with an easier opponent. So you can work that pass. You know, a white belt's going to do something that you've never seen before. It's in their nature to do it. They're not as structured as people. They're not like us. They're not normal. They'll do weird things. You know, among that, big weird noises.
I was thinking of a roll ad with a lad. I mean, we've got a lad that's joined the gym and he's freakishly strong, and it's like I am working stuff. I'm not passing him because he's so strong and I think I'm going to get hurt, but I'm working like guard retention or, you know, and it's a testing thing because of his strength. And I just think, where's this coming from? You know,
but we have one that just started. I think he's done 2 or 3 classes, and his first class, you know, he was at there. He's with one of the guys, a purple belt. He brought his friend down. He's a lovely guy. Don't get me wrong, but he has this.
Yeah.
You know, so they called me over to show the technique that I was doing. It was a choke. It was a choke, and I sort of, as soon as he put his hands on me, I went, you know, I'm too old for this. And it's a long day. So you have to sort of go right, and you get to the technique part, and you sort of squeeze it a bit, and you go there. You know, now the longer you stretch this out, the more that's going to hurt.
Yeah.
But you know, so the first one, as I say, you should start. You will get stuff out of it because that's your time to practice your technique. It's also the guy on bottom. This is his hard role, right? He's learning his defense. He's learning to try to defend against what you're doing. So he's working that. You're working whatever plan comes into your head. The 50-50 one is when the two of you are going to go at it. You know, so you might go, but this technique worked with the white. I'll see if I can get it to work with this guy.
Yeah.
Right? And it might work. Might not, because this guy has more experience. He has more defense. And if you can get it, then now you understand the technique you're trying to get. The last roll, that's when you're going to get smashed. You know what I mean?
So that's your defense.
So that's you working your defense.
Yeah.
But the difference is, you have a lot more experience. You know, so you're not going to defend the way the white belt did.
Yeah.
You're going to defend against the way a purple belt should. So your technique should be a lot better. You know, technique is my thing. I'm very picky about technique.
I want to. Some of the stuff you taught, I was like, oh my God, and I was like, I've got to write this down so I don't forget it, because. I trained with Cole the other night over at Vanquish, and I come away and I was just like, again 3 gems, and I was just like, this is great, you know, and this is why it's so good. And this is why the hobby's great with doing the podcast is, you know, jiu-jitsu gets you to meet different people, introduce you to all different types of people from different walks of life with a common ground, and that's all on the mat. And I will learn a different approach. At each club, and it's fantastic. That's what it is. And then I can take it back to my club.
It's a different approach.
Yes.
You know, an armbar is an armbar is an armbar.
Yeah,
you know, that's the way it is. You know you have to get the thumb to the ceiling, but it's how you get to that point.
Exactly, yeah. So, how would you, because your background is traditional jiu-jitsu and then you transition to Brazilian jiu-jitsu, what are the kind of main differences? How would you sum up the difference? Say we're in a bar and I was like, well, what's the difference between Japanese versus Brazilian?
Brazilian, no, again, here's the thing with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at the minute has evolved into a sport, right? However, there's a large chunk of that sport that people are still to this day neglecting. Now,
Self-defense?
The self-defense part of it, the stand-up part of it. Now, we're lucky we've trained in judo. Yeah. And as I said to you earlier, you're seeing a lot of judo people, especially in the Olympics and Commonwealth and stuff like that. You can see jiu-jitsu coming into their game, right? The judo rules has changed, obviously. You know,
yeah, I think Andy agreed with me when I podcasted. They killed it off in the Olympics when they stopped double legs.
Yeah, they killed once.
You know,
once they stopped allowing the leg grabs and stuff.
And then you've got 3 seconds on a cross collar grip as opposed to 10 on a lateral collar grip.
I remember going for the last grading I went to, right? I was the only guy who got pulled, and it was for a cross collar grip. I got penalised for it, right? Because I went for that. But you can see how logically these two things, they're the same thing. Do you know what I mean? If you stand in judo, right, and go onto the floor, then obviously they're going to stand you, right? Jiu-jitsu, you want to get on the floor, but you have to get from here to here. You know, you have to get from standing to the floor. So, Japanese, if you go, whenever I get my hooks into something, I like to be passionate about it. I like to look into the history of it, like where music's concerned. You know, I hear a song, I want to know who did it first. Do you know what I mean? I want to hear what that was like. I'm into rockabilly. I'm in the 50s music. I'm into psychobilly, rockabilly and stuff. So the first time I heard Elvis Presley do Mystery Train, or That's All Right Mama, which started him off, right? And then you realise that's not his song. That's a blues song. Do you know what I mean? Hound Dog. You realise, oh, this guy did this. No, that came from this. It came from this. Judo came from jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, they created a national sport, didn't they?
But Kano, whenever Kano went to form the Kodokan, Kano was a jiu-jitsu guy, because jiu-jitsu then was the Japanese art.
Yes. Yeah.
Whenever Kano started judo, there was still a lot of jiu-jitsu in it. You know, there was still a lot of locks and chokes and stuff. A lot of stuff that we see now, triangles, arm, you know, all that sort of thing. They were there years. Whenever this thing was first done, you know, it's whenever they started the Olympic side of it. Then it was, you know, we can't do this, and we can't do this, and we can't do this. And then over the years, it's evolved into now you really can't do this, and you can't do it, but spoiled it. Spoiled a lot of it, you know. And again, I'll go back to what I said. People who came from those sort of Japanese backgrounds into Brazilian backgrounds, they tend to think, oh, we don't need that. You know, we don't need stand-up. We don't need throws. We don't need takedowns. We don't need that. You know, so how are you going to get to there? You know, I've black belts in 2 forms of Japanese jiu-jitsu. I have a black belt in Kempo jiu-jitsu, and then I started again under Ross, as I said. I got my 2nd degree black belt in Taijutsu Kai, right? Taijutsu Kai was very, very much traditional grappling jiu-jitsu, right? So the throws made a lot more sense. You know, especially, as I said, whenever I first started in judo, and then you go to this, the throws made a lot more sense. The grips, the movement made a lot more sense. So I still, to this day, as you've seen at the start of the class, you know, work grips. You know, work close in the distance. Take your grips. You know, strip the grip off. Turn in like you're going for throws. You know, always be moving.
Yeah.
Which I bring back to the way we roll at the end. Most people start off on their knees and they do their thing, right? We come from a Carlson background. BJJ Revolution, it used to be a Carlson Gracie BJJ Revolution team. Revolution only appeared whenever Carlson died. I'm still big friends with Carlson Jr. incidentally. Right. So Carlson Jr. put me onto this. He said, you've got to read this book, The Evolution of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He says it tells a better story of how Jiu-Jitsu started rather than the one that we're fed.
Yeah, you know? Yeah.
So whenever you read, and one of the black belts in it's describing how they trained in Brazil under Carlson and Holds Gracie. And they start in guard. They don't start separated. They start locked in guard, and then the roll starts. Right. The accepting the tap and then moving, I kind of threw that part in, you know, because again, I get this from Andy. Andy, constant movement. You got to be moving. You got to be moving. You know. So my view is, get tapped, accept the tap, sort of go right, okay, tap, let the tap go, but then you got to move. And if you let the guy get to that same position, that same tap, that's on you. You know, as soon as you get released, you got to be thinking escape. You got to move. You know, and it gets a better. My opinion, it gets a better roll in. You are rolling for. We do a 6-minute round, so 3 minutes you start off on bottom, and then you switch to 3 minutes. You start and you put that into any position. You can start. The roll's going to start on the back seatbelt position. Do you know what I mean? Escape. But the roll has to continue. You know, and if you sit for 3 minutes with someone on your back, you need to look at your back escapes. You need to look at where you're going with that.
Yeah.
You know, but it's all.
What was that like? I suppose starting again at white belt for because you did that, didn't you? You basically said, "Look, I know I've got a black belt, but if we're going to take BJJ seriously, we've all got to start at white belts."
Yeah, we all have to start. And oh God, I still get tapped to this day. You know, Andy Ryan comes up here, kills me. Does it for badness, I think, half the time.
Did you hear the story about there was a wrestler that turned up, and I think he was from like the old Warsaw Pact countries, maybe like Chechnya or something like that.
God.
And he turned up, and Andy said he kind of sat back and he watched him, and he was cutting through everyone. And Andy was just like, hold on there, I'll be on the mat in a minute. And then Andy went on, and Andy tied him up, like, you know, really like churned him over, and the guy crawled off the mat. But Andy said, "Yeah, you go on, I'm stretching." And then he was like, "Is he gone?" "Yeah." Fucking hell.
Oh, listen, I'll tell you a story.
He done his hamstrings, and he was like, Jesus, is he gone? Yeah.
Andy was up doing a session here one time, and all the guys thought that me and him had went off for a coffee.
Yeah.
Right? They're all going, Peter and Andy, or they must have left. And then they heard the screams. And they looked down your back, and there's me getting tossed around.
Oh,
and they go,
yeah.
Andy's got him.
Yeah.
You know, that's.
How did you two meet?
We, as I said, we were members of SBG, the two of us.
Yeah, but how did that happen?
Well,
there's a good like 2.5 hours between Dublin and Belfast, so.
What happened was, as I said, John came up to speak to Ross.
Right. Okay.
Right. And I met John through Ross, and then that sort of connect. John had went to Andy to learn judo, and while he was there, he was teaching Andy jiu-jitsu. But then there was myself, because I would have went to Dublin. Myself, John, Andy, Dave Jones at the time. Then there was people like Colin O'Reilly, Mark Leonard, you know, Fergal Quinlan, you know, and Fergal and Mark Leonard, I think, were in Limerick and Galway. So Dublin was like the hub, you know, and none of us had a clue. None of us had an idea what we were doing. We had books, you know, or old VHS tapes or magazines, or someone had learned something from somebody, you know. So I honestly think it was the Carly Gracie thing coming across first, and then we had this guy that we trained with. Then after a while there was a guy, Francisco Bueno came over, Paddy brought him over. So we had that. Francisco Bueno had a 5-point system that he worked from top, right? And I still use it to this day, right? It was basically your top position, right? It's the same where Matt Thornton brought in this. We have 5 things in top position, 5 things in bottom, you know, things that if you get the sequence into it, then,
right,
you know, you can work it basically into everything. So you had that, but we were literally, John and Dave and a couple of others went over to America, and I think they went to Chris Brennan first on their next generation, as was. Dave stayed with Chris, and John then met up with Matt. Now, I would say the longest running BJJ club that I can put in the country would have been Gracie Baha under Graham Keys, and I think that was in Belfast. So that was the one. That was the only, I would say, real Brazilian jiu-jitsu class. The rest of us didn't have anybody. We were all still training out of books until John came back with SBG. Right. So John then put it out, look, we're going to do this. So it was the only, none of us had any grades or anything. So, but at least this way we could get somebody who could assess us and who could
right,
grade.
which was Matt Thornton. Right.
So, as I said, I got my blue belt off John 2005. Andy was a purple belt then, I think, because he had stayed with John longer or something. But Andy had got his purple. Plus, Andy was killing people. Andy was going out competition. He used to fought in America and stuff at the time. Killed people, still does to this day. But Andy used to be a bigger guy than what you see. I've never seen anyone move as fast.
Judo.
That was ridiculously fast. Andy's saying, Uchimata, ankle lock. That was it. And you can fight against it, but he'll get you. So that's the way he does it. So you had that, and then there was a disagreement as such. It's the best
as there
way.
always is.
As there always is. And there still is to this
day.
Yeah,
of course, yeah.
I have it in this club, and there's people who have left this club under a cloud. There's people I've asked to leave under a cloud, and that's the way it is. So there was disagreement. Andy phoned me this one day and he said, look, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave SBG, and I went, right, well, I'll go with you wherever we're going. So there was other people, I could have went with Chris Brennan, I could have looked for something completely different, but Andy's my friend, and he was then, still is now. And whenever he said we're going under Rodrigo Revolution, and I went, I'd never met Rodrigo. So I'm like, right, okay, let's see what he's like. So whenever I met up with Rodrigo, we had a chat. I was a blue belt then. Rodrigo gave me my my purple, 2009. And I've been with them ever since.
Yeah.
I tell people it took 17 years to get black, which is a lot longer than a lot of people now. Most people get it 10 years, maybe something like that. It took 17 years to get it, and now I'm a third, and then I've been a black belt 9-10 years now. So it just keeps. I actually forgot.
You've been a black belt longer than I've been training jiu-jitsu.
God. Way to make me feel old, Paul. Cheers.
No. What I mean is you've been doing it. Oh, look, I'm not going to dig a hole there, but I think everyone coming through, we owe you lot like such a debt, because you did it first and you put in the sweat, the time, the effort. You know what I mean? It's like with my coach Steve. Steve actually started off in jiu-jitsu and then went into judo and then come back to jiu-jitsu. And his coach before him, Rich Green, and then who was before Rich in Coventry? We actually had Mauricio for a bit in Birmingham.
Oh, yes, right.
Mauricio Gomez, which is Hodges' dad, came
I trained
over.
with Mauricio. He's the loveliest man.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you a story about Hodger. Hodger, the first time he came over, was Hodger actually lived in Ballymun in Dublin.
Did they?
Yeah, we'll not go down that road. Ask Andy when you're down.
Oh, wow.
Right. He came over, but he actually, the first time he was up here, Graham Keys brought him over. And what had happened was he had the seminar in one of the leisure centres, and Graham phoned me and he says, do you want to come down? I was just here, and I went, yeah. So I go down, I'd run out of the house without a white belt. So I had my black belt, my Japanese black belt. So I go to Graham and I go, Graham, man, you know, I forgot my belt. Does anyone have a white belt? Or, you know, or can I wear my black? And Graham, I thought it was a brown belt, incidentally. I don't think it was a black belt. And Graham goes, you just stick.
Oh no.
You know where this is going,
yeah,
dude?
yeah.
So
yeah.
I'm at one end of the room, and I go sort of around, so I take my belt out of my bag, and I start, and I look up, and Hodger's looking at me, and I'm, and I see him going to Graham. Who's that? And Graham goes, no, he's forgot his belt. Hodger was for killing me that night. And obviously I was used as the body for the entire night.
Oh.
It was not pleasant. But it was just the way I did it. They'll sort of look up and this guy's just, no, you're dead.
Yeah.
Oh man, no, that's all I need. But yeah, that was one of the first. But yeah, Ballymun, whenever he first went to Dublin.
That's mental. Yeah, so we kind of had Mauricio who went to Birmingham, and he was teaching in the custard factory out there. It's just like an area.
Yeah.
It's like flats, and you know. And then from Birmingham, I think he then went down to London, and then Hodger met him in London, and Braulio took over in Birmingham. Braulio Steamer took over in Birmingham.
Because I think if I'm right, where Mauricio was concerned, there was some issue about a visa or something that he couldn't.
I wouldn't know the ins and outs.
I think that's what it was, because he was meant to start off. But then I trained with Rick Young.
Oh yeah, up in Scotland.
Scotland.
Yeah.
And he was again. I think it's one of these things that has got me into really being picky about technique.
Yeah.
You know, I just got my brown belt, and Rick said, Rick's a black belt obviously in jiu-jitsu, right? He's the loveliest man, but very gruff if you've met him.
Yeah.
But he's the loveliest man.
He still competes.
Yeah.
Yeah, he still competes.
He won the,
and
I think it was no gi worlds or something,
No,
didn't he?
I think he won a gi worlds.
Was it the gi worlds?
Yeah,
he still does his thing. But he says to me, Peter, stick a gi on, and he was over teaching Wing Chun, the Filipino boxing and stuff. He was over here teaching that.
Right.
So he says to me, Peter, put the gi on and we'll do a bit thing. So, and he said to me about doing arm bar from bottom. Right, so brown belt, I go, yeah. Arm bar from bottom. And so he goes, but watch this. And he just changed, just a detail, just a minor thing.
Yeah.
And it's like a whole different technique.
Wow.
You know, just one thing, he just went, oh, just try it this way. And like, armbar from bottom, he's done a million times. Do you know what I mean? But he just changed one detail on it.
Our kind of lineage is John Will.
Yeah.
Yeah, and John's coming over again in the summer. He was over last summer, and he basically gave us a great tip, and he said, I got to black belt, and then, because it's Machado lineage, I'm not sure which one, but one of the Machado brothers basically said, right, you know, John, well done, brother, you now reach black belt. And he goes, now I've got to teach you everything all over again, start again.
But do you not think, even as a purple belt, right, and I say this to the guys who are even blues and purples, right, that if you were to do now a white belt technique, by rights that should be a far better technique.
Yeah, with the time.
With the time, sir. And so you can go back, by all rights, the stuff that you were taught the first day.
Yeah.
And if you did it again now,
if
you still did it at the level you did it at the start.
So what did you think that's more about the brain not being able to comprehend the knowledge? As in, because if you teach it like what he said, and I went, I don't get that, I don't understand that. If you know how to do it, do it. Because if there are so many subtle differences, then surely it's a different variation.
If you look at it like it's a big block, the first time you're taught, it's just a block. Right, there you go, there's the technique. And everything is like blocky, it's clunky, your movement's not that good. Your grips might be wrong. But then you get the blue belt and you do the same technique. Right, so you've chipped a bit away from that. Now your movement should be a bit better. You know, your understanding of the movement should be a bit better. And then as you go to purple, then you go, it should be a bit better again. It should be a bit, you know, you should be able to incorporate a few, you should be looking at different things. Like for talk's sake, like today whenever I said about posture, right? And I go, the first time I was taught, this is the way it was, right? No, you base and posture, and you did your thing, right? Which is still right and still valid. It still has its thing. It's not what I would do now. It's probably not what you would do now, you know, because you've not found a better way of doing it, but you understand what needs to be done better.
Yeah, now you're trying to achieve the subtle nuances.
Yes.
All right.
So
okay.
that would be the difference in it. The difference in it is, right, we've got base and posture, but what's that for? Right, you have to, you know, kill off the legs, the hips, the thing, you know, open the guard and then move on. So you probably have found, though, do I have to be so high up? You know, can I not kill the hips off this way? Can I not control the arms this way? You know, can I not open it this way? How do I open the guard? You know, like what I said yesterday, the way I would move the hips out a little bit, right, which starts that tension going on, right? Whenever I was first taught how to pass guard, I would never have done it. I wouldn't have known how to do it.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
But now I'll go back and it's the same technique. I just started off a different way, you know, and then it becomes like my technique, you know. So whenever you go back and you're in your class and you go, I saw this, even the stuff that Cole taught you or the stuff you were taught in Andy's place, and you go back and but I saw that it's the same technique we were doing.
Yeah.
I've seen these guys over there and they're
doing this, yeah.
You know,
yeah.
You know, and the thing is, it's not like you can buy the instructional video of us doing this. This is something that's done in a class.
You have to be there and you have to do it live.
Yeah.
You have to live it and breathe it and stuff.
Exactly.
And that's what I think travelling and getting around is always really good.
Yeah, because you pick stuff up.
Yeah.
You're going to go over, you're going to steal some stuff.
Yeah,
it's not like the English to do that, is it? Like,
yeah. That's how it is, isn't it? People taking stuff from one, you know, to another. So.
And I find, well, the gyms I go into, you know, and the guys that I have over here, you know, none of them are greedy about their technique. No, they come in, you want to see some stuff? Yeah, we'll show you some stuff.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And you know I'm going to steal it, but, you know, come in and have a go and see. Well, and, you know, but at the same time, I'm watching what you're doing going, how did he do that?
Well, yeah. How does he move? And
you know, because then I'll steal your stuff.
Oh, okay, yeah. I wouldn't steal anything of mine. It's not going to do you any favours. Okay, Peter, we've had a great chat. Probably going to wrap it up now. Is there anything kind of like you want to like? Is there any message you want to get out there about the gym, or maybe something that people didn't know, or you know, is there anything you need to push or promote? Or
my thing is, as I said, the only thing I'm useless is self-promotion. Andy will probably tell you that. You know, Andy's been at me to go and do seminars for people and stuff, and I'm useless at self-promotion, if the truth was told.
Yeah.
As I said, we've had people in the gym. Gyms are the same; they leave and they come back, and you know, everything. And we kind of leave our doors open. You know, I just want people to train. You know, enjoy what we do. You know, I'm blessed with where jiu-jitsu is concerned. It's because I've been able to travel the world. I've been able to meet a lot of people. I've had a lot of people, yourself and stuff, call into the gym, you know, and enjoy what we do and have fun, you know. And as long as that continues, you know, I've people that are saying to me that I should retire. You know, my answer to that is, you retire from a job. You don't retire from a hobby or something that you enjoy doing, or you know, but that's your passion. You know, I think they're going to stretcher me off these mats at one stage. Do you know what I mean? And I would just like Andy Rand to stop shouting at me. If you can put my message across as I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, but if Andy would stop shouting at me, I'd be a lot better off.
I'm sure I'll send it as a clip. Peter, thanks so much for having me today as a guest. I've really enjoyed it.
The class.
And you've made me feel so welcome. I've had a fantastic time in Belfast, and off to Dublin.
Again?
Yep. Let me turn that off now.